And maybe can you pause the room because it's a beautiful fall day so that you can spend some time outside perhaps. So hello everyone and welcome. As Meredith said, we are going to be presenting about Grad School 101, all that you need to know. So I'm Holly. I'm a fourth year PhD student in environmental engineering. And so I advise people who are interested in pursuing a STEM MS or a PhD degree. And so I definitely welcome you all to either make an appointment with me or send an email to me if you have any questions or want to discuss your specific situation. But hopefully we'll answer some of the most common questions in this presentation. And I'll turn it over to my counterpart, Tom.
I'll echo a lot of that and just say I'm Tom. I am a sixth year student in Renaissance Studies and History, and I've also been working in OCS advising folks in the humanities and social sciences. So you can always make an appointment with me on Simplicity or, reach me by email as you see there. Welcome. And we are looking forward to Grad School 101.
And I'll just do a very brief introduction of myself. My name is Meredith Mira. I am a Senior Associate Director in the Office of Career Strategy. I have had the wonderful opportunity to work with Holly and Tom over this past year and to support students over the past 5 or 6 years through the Office of Career Strategy who are applying to graduate school for master's or PhD programs. You are in their very capable hands. I'm going to be jumping off for now, but if you ever have further questions and aren't sure which person to turn to, you can certainly always get in touch with me. I recognize my email is not up there, but I'm Meredith Mira, and I'm sure you would be able to find me. So I will turn it over to Holly.
Thank you, Meredith. And so just to get this started, as Meredith said before, we really want this to be a useful presentation for all of you. And so we've curated kind of the most common questions that we get when we meet with students individually. But if your question is not addressed here, feel free to put it in the Q&A or send an email to any of the three of us or make an appointment with any of the three of us, again, to discuss any particular questions that you have. So the most common questions we have, the first one, and I put it first because it comes first chronologically, but also because in my opinion, it's the most important question, is why should I go to graduate school? And this is a really personal question. So we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about some of the distinctions between an MA, MS degree versus a PhD. The second question is, how does funding work? And then again, how does that look different for a PhD versus an MA, MS? The third question is, how many programs should I apply to? And how do I even begin to find where those programs are? And then should I have safety schools? This is a really common question because our parallel for applying to graduate school, our only similar experience perhaps is applying to undergrad. So we'll talk about that question as well. What do I need for a successful application? What are the different components? And we'll give you some tips about how to carefully curate those different components. And then lastly, we're just going to leave it all on the table. What does the application timeline look like? We oftentimes meet with students who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, so perhaps not applying currently, or seniors who are thinking about taking a gap year. And so we'll talk about, if you were to apply, this is kind of what the whole timeline looks like. So as I said, the most important question perhaps to ask is why graduate school? And again, I emphasize this question because it's a really personal question about why are you considering going to graduate school? And one question, sub-question underneath that is, what do I want to do with my degree? And this can perhaps inform whether you want to pursue a master's degree or a PhD. A PhD, I like to think of it as you're learning a mile deep, but perhaps 3 inches in that. You're going to become an expert in your field and are going to be in the production of knowledge, whereas a lot of your undergraduate coursework perhaps has been the consumption of knowledge. So as you're reading those textbooks and reading those literature, do you want to be on the other side of the table saying, I want to be the one producing the new information and adding to this anthology in your particular field? Versus a master's degree oftentimes is more professionally focused. And so when you're thinking about pursuing a master's degree, it's a typically 1 or 2 year program, and oftentimes people pursue these degrees because they have a very clear, specific career goal after the fact. So I want to pursue a master's degree in data science because I want to pursue X field, and with this degree, I will be able to access these entry-level positions that are maybe here versus just from undergraduate, I can only access them here. And so this sometimes is a good distinction of you're more on the side of consuming in a professional degree as a master's student. Not always the case, but it most of the time is, versus a PhD, you're really in the nitty-gritty of doing the research. And so to that point, when you're thinking about doing a PhD and also a master's too, thinking about what topics are you truly excited about. And so with this, I will digress a little and talk about my own personal journey, which is that I was a chemistry and physics major in undergrad. I was doing physical chemistry research. And though I really liked the research process and I really loved my advisor, I realized that the research that I was doing was not really compatible with my ultimate interests and career goals. So though I enjoyed it, I wasn't really passionate about it in the way that I wanted to pursue a PhD. And so this kind of goes to the last question of, do I want to take time off? As I was thinking about pursuing graduate school, I realized I didn't know what topics I was really excited about. So I decided to take time off to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And so through that experience of taking time off, I was able to clarify oh, what I'm really interested in is the application of chemistry to environmental problems. And so in that year, I figured out that I didn't want to pursue a PhD in chemistry, but in fact, environmental engineering. And so taking time off is a really common way for people to, one, clarify what they are interested in, two, take a little bit of a breather, take a little bit of a break after undergraduate, especially in your senior year. You're doing a thesis, perhaps there's some burnout associated with that. So taking time away to take a little bit of a breath is also very valid. I'll say some people also use time off to bulk up their research experience, maybe going and working for a biomedical NIH lab. I personally taught middle school for a year, which was not research related, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm very glad that I did take time off. Tom, can you did you take time off? Do you have any thoughts or recommendations?
I did not take time off. I don't know if I wish I taught middle school, but I wish I had taken some time off. I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for you as a person and your development, especially as a young person. I think it's good to distance yourself from your studies so that you aren't, as Holly says, when you get into the nitty gritty, you don't really want to just keep zeroing and zero in, but it'll help you also see a broad picture and think a little bit about why your research is important in the world. I recommend time off.
Great, yeah. And then of course, this presentation wouldn't be complete without having a side little box about the COVID-19 consideration. And one of the points that we want to caution you against perhaps is seeing graduate school as a safety option or pursuing graduate school because of anxieties or fears around the job market. I know it's really easy to say, well, I'm at Yale, I am good at doing school, I know how to do school, so I can continue to do school in graduate school. And again, I will say that grad school is oftentimes very different from the undergraduate experience. So we do want to make sure that we're just saying, consider all of your options, and pursuing graduate school out of perhaps fear or anxiety might be a little bit of an antenna should go up and say, maybe I need to take a step back. Maybe once you're not in the craziness of doing school now, and just reassess whether it's really something that you want to commit 5 or 6 years to. We also want to say that, and this is getting slightly better now that we're getting further away from the peak of the pandemic, but as a result of travel restrictions, making it so that oftentimes, for example, anthropology students couldn't travel and go do their research or travel to archives, or science students couldn't travel to the national labs that they needed to. A lot of programs are extending the time available for grad students to complete their degree. And so what was a guarantee of 5 years is now 6 years. What was 6 years is now 7. So people are taking longer to finish their degrees as a result of those delays. And as a result of that, there's sometimes in certain programs, some competitiveness / reduced funding of programs to meet the needs of current PhD students who are finishing up. And so again, this is really program and school specific, so we don't have a hard and fast rule there, but we did want it to put that out there so that you're going in eyes wide open. And so another question as you're considering pursuing graduate school is the question of funding. And you can see that we split this up a little bit because it's slightly different for PhD programs and master's programs. So I'll start with PhD. which is that it's program and school specific, but generally you are not paying to attend. I, in fact, went to a workshop maybe a week ago with people from different biomedical science fields, including NIH labs, and they straight up said, do not go to graduate school unless they're paying your tuition and paying your stipend, and at the very least your healthcare. So those three things are really, really important. And I would say that 99% of the schools will be covering that for you. And it actually might be a red flag if they're saying, actually, we are not paying you this. So just something to be aware of.
Holly, can I just say like big underscore on that point? I mean, I know it's not maybe necessary, but you know, because Holly speaks with such great authority, august authority, but nevertheless, huge underscore on that point.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I would like to say with this caveat of you should not be paying to attend, they should be paying for you to do your research and do your work, is that, to be frank, the money that you receive won't enable you to live in a high-rise tower in New York City or even New Haven. And so as you're thinking about pursuing a PhD, just being cognizant of the fact that you probably will take 5 or 6 years of being not paid very much, as opposed to people who go and work directly in the industry. So there is a little bit of that like financial difference that I always just say, you don't go to graduate school for the money, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And just something to be aware of, that the stipend will be enough to cover your living expenses, but won't be enough perhaps for you to like live on the penthouse floor in New York City. There's also a question, depending on your personal situation, about childcare considerations. I know this one is huge, and with the bills going through Congress right now, we all know childcare is incredibly expensive. And so thinking about, as you're looking at different schools, what offers are there on the table for childcare? For example, I know that Yale is offers, I think it's like $5,000 or $10,000 per child under the age of 5. Or something along those lines. So thinking about when you're looking at schools, if you do have a child or a partner with a child or et cetera, what is available to you. In addition to these things that are generally standard and generally covered, there of course are other living expenses, and you might want some extra cash. So what on-campus requirements or options are available to boost your stipend? For many PhD programs, TFing, TAing is a requirement to get your stipend. And so you will be teaching X number of semesters. But if you teach more than that, perhaps you get an extra amount of money. That's the case for me in engineering. There are also different jobs you can do, like working for the Office of Career Strategy. So what other options are available to boost your stipend? So even though all of this is covered and or available to you as an extra job, it is never a bad idea to apply for fellowships, which will again pay for your tuition and pay for your stipend. Different fellowships like NSF, NDSEG, Ford, Soros, et cetera, in addition to being just an excellent gold star to have on your resume, can also afford you some freedom and flexibility to do research in a variety of different areas, because your funding is not directly from a PI or a department or a project. And so the fellowships office is a great place to talk to, especially as you're thinking about applying to grad school, because there's a lot of overlap between what you would need for a fellowship and what you would need for graduate school. So perhaps 2 birds, 1 stone there. For an MA/MS program, the answer is slightly different because it's very difficult, but definitely not impossible to get a fully funded program. And you can look at different program websites to see if there are options for funded programs or partial scholarship options. Again, fellowships is a great place to talk to if you're interested in doing a master's degree, particularly abroad. Fulbright, Mitchell, Rhodes can all pay for master's degrees in the UK or in a variety of different countries. So that might be a way for you to pay for your degree abroad. But oftentimes an MA/MS program is thought of as like a return on investment in the same way that going to law school or going to med school is. So you might be taking out loans in the short term, but then in the long term, thinking about what options and opportunities might come up after having pursued this degree. And so now, given all of this background information, thinking about why you want to apply and how you might pay for it, you have decided, I do want to apply. Now what do I do? And so a question we get really commonly is, how many programs and how do I find them? And so again, this is a really personal question because it oftentimes depends. We usually say or see people applying between 4 and 8 schools, though that can be as low as 1 school or as high as 10 schools. It really is different for different people, but we do say consider the financial implications. And I say that because a lot of programs still have these application fees that you have to pay. And I think that when I applied to Yale, it was something on the order of $100 or $125 just to submit an application. So if you're applying to 10 schools, that can easily add up to $1,000 if you don't apply for application fee waivers, which you can do, but oftentimes the information for that is a little bit opaque to say the least. And so just considering the financial implications of applying to a lot of different schools. Additionally, for each school, you will, as we will talk about, have a different personal statement, a different supplemental statement, all of these things. So it suddenly becomes a lot of plates that are spinning if you're applying to more than like 10, count on 2 hands schools. But to start your list, our number one piece of advice is to leverage your network. So talk to current graduate students. If you're in a class right now that has a TA, go to their office hours to talk about going to graduate school. They are really available. And if you can't tell from me and Tom right now, we love talking about ourselves and our process. So if you see someone who's doing research or has gotten a degree that you are interested in, go and talk to them and hear about their experience. Also, leverage your incredible network of professors here at Yale. Even if you're not currently taking a class with them, reach out via email and talk to them about their field, about their research. You going to office hours and making these connections with professors will be a really important way for you to kind of gauge the research that you potentially would want to do, and also what schools you might be interested in applying to. After doing this, or in conjunction with doing this, maybe looking at US News World Report, which ranks schools. And I put that in air quotes because it's not abundantly clear how they get those rankings.
So actually, just as a little aside, you know that Malcolm Gladwell just did a podcast episode on the U.S. News and World Report. So if you're interested in all this, and by the way, needless to say, because he's Malcolm Gladwell, he was very suspect of the way those come out. But still, you know, they do say something. It's worthwhile. It is worthwhile. But you can learn about this by listening to a little pitch for Malcolm Gladwell and his revisionist history. There you go.
Always looking for great podcasts, especially when it's a little bit suspect of something that I am also a suspect of, which are these rankings. But that's not to say that they can't be, they are not useful. Because if you look at this list, you can say, oh, I didn't even think about this school. So then you can see like University of Iowa on the list, and then you can go to their webpage, look at their faculty research, look at the different courses that are available, do all of the things that we say later on in this slide. So using it as a springboard from which to do more research. So I guess what we're saying is don't just apply to the top 10 schools, use that as a leverage to then go and look at those program websites.
On the other hand, what's really important is that Yale history is number 1. So there you go.
You're kind of a big deal, Tom. And as you're starting your list too, be really honest about your deal breakers. I've talked to a number of people for whom they're like, is it superficial to only choose graduate schools based on location? And I would say no, because you want to make sure that you're in an environment that's going to be supportive of you, whether that means being close to family, being close to partners, being in a city, being in a professional network that you might want to connect with in the future. I think location is actually a really important deal breaker, and it's not superficial at all. But in addition to that, thinking about research topics, course requirements, etc. Be honest with yourself as you're looking at schools, and ask yourself as you're starting this list, if I were to get into this place, would I go? Would I be happy here? And if you're hesitant or you don't know the answer to that, that could be, again, an antenna raised of like, maybe I need to consider whether I want to have this on my list. And so that's how you start the list. Evaluating it, again, as I said, go directly to the program and faculty websites. Start reading what their research interests are, what courses they teach, what opportunities they have available for internships if you're doing an MS or an MA degree, and ask yourself, what is really getting you excited? As you're reading faculty web pages, are you saying, wow, this person is applying, in my case, chemistry to design drinking water treatment materials. For me, I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. And so from there, I then went and reviewed my current advisor and a number of people's publications. And so we recommend that you do the same of going on to Google Scholar or JSTOR and looking to see what their most recent work is and who they're collaborating with, who they're working with, who they're being cited by, all of these things. So even if that just means that you're reading 10 abstracts, abstracts are still better than nothing. But if you're reading an abstract and you're saying, wow, I want to learn all about this, read the whole paper. Just get a sense of, is this something that you could see yourself doing long-term? For an MA/MS degree, again, because it's more professionally focused, asking yourself, what is the focus of the program? And you can kind of glean that by looking and seeing what courses are required versus what courses are available. So is there a set curriculum that you have to take plus X number of electives, and what electives are there? Are there electives that you would be interested in taking? Are there specialties that you would be interested in pursuing? If you want to pursue a master's in education, for example, do they have opportunities for you to get into local schools? Something along those lines as you're beginning to evaluate your list. And then the last part of this, which is the question that we get really frequently about pursuing a safety school. Graduate school is very, very different from undergraduate. Because you're primarily spending time in one department, and again, a producer of knowledge, if in a PhD program, a producer of knowledge in that department and working directly with one or two advisors, the match, both research and personality wise, and like with the department writ large, is really essential. So as you're looking at different people who could potentially be advisors or mentors, asking where are they in their career? Someone who is an expert in their field and has been for the past 30 years will be very different than someone who is an assistant professor who is in the tenure track currently. So asking where they are in their career, also how do they approach their field? You can kind of glean that by reading research papers. Asking yourself what type of mentor fits your needs. Do you need someone who's a little bit more hands-on and is telling you do this, then do this, then do this? Or do you want someone who just gives you the reins and says, here's the big idea, go figure out how to do it or how to research that? So asking yourself that question too. And so in order to gauge the answers to these questions for potential advisors, we usually recommend that you reach out to them in the fall, usually like end of September, end of September, maybe early October, to confirm the research or personality match. And so reaching out to advisors via email might look like, hi, my name is Holly. These are my interests. This is why it overlaps really well with your interests. Would you have time to jump on a phone call to discuss? And for me, that was a really great way to make connections with faculty that I was interested in working with, and also getting a sense of how they operate as a person over the phone. There were a couple of interactions that I felt really intimidated and scared, and there were a number of them that I felt totally comfortable, and we just chatted for a while. And so that can maybe give you insight into how they might be as an advisor. I will say though, some programs admit as a department. So you come in and you do perhaps rotations with different labs, or you start working with a number of different faculty, and then you narrow it down to an individual person. But some programs admit as individual faculty members. So the people that you connect with are directly responsible for saying like, I want Tom, and he is going to work with me. And so that's just different between different programs. And again, this is why we say connecting with current graduate students and professors in your department will be the best way to gauge what the protocol is for your department. And so, oh, I skipped a slide. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what does it look like to put together a successful application. And so the mostly essential components are a personal statement, which we'll spend a lot of time on, recommendation letters, which we'll also spend a lot of time on, and a transcript with your undergraduate coursework. Other possible components are GRE test scores, and I moved GRE from essential to possible because, yay, a lot of places are making it so that GREs are not required. Some places are keeping them as optional, and some of them are just saying don't even bother submitting them, which is a good thing. But some places still are having them be a requirement, so we'll talk a little bit about that. For humanities and social sciences, you might have to submit a writing sample, and so that can be between like 15, 20 pages of perhaps your thesis. And so that obviously more applicable to the writing heavy disciplines as opposed to math heavy disciplines like my engineering field. A lot of places are also including a diversity statement. So talking about your personal background and how you would contribute to the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging of a particular department. As I mentioned, applying to graduate school can add up in terms of financial costs. So there are also application fee waivers that you might have to navigate. And then of course, there are program specific prompts. I'm working with a graduate student, or I'm working with an undergraduate right now who's applying to 6 different programs, and each program has a slightly different version of the same question. In 250 words, answer this question, but then you go and apply to Harvard and it's in 500 words, answer this. So it's slightly different for each program. And so it gets to be, as I said, a lot of plate spinning of trying to answer program specific prompts. And so like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the personal statement. So I'll just start it off by talking about the logistics. Part of the reason we're going to be spending a lot of time on the personal statement is because it's probably the most important part of your application. It's your opportunity to use your voice to explain your story and your interest in doing research in a particular field, interest in pursuing a master's degree in a particular field. But the rest of the application is either other people saying things about you or your transcript or GRE scores numerically saying something about you. This is your chance to add some color to your own personal narrative. And so it's usually around 1.5 to 2 pages, single spaced. Usually a good benchmark is 1,000 words. But again, this can sometimes differ between different programs. And if you are applying in, let's say this fall, or sorry, next fall, like 2022, we would suggest that you draft throughout the summer 2022 and fall, because getting a lot of eyes on your personal statement is really, really important. So having your advisor read your personal statement, having colleagues read your personal statement, having either Tom or I read your personal statement, and giving yourself and the people that are reading your statement enough time to look at it will be really important. You can also use this personal statement to address questionable aspects of your application. I've seen this actually as a supplemental essay in a number of places. So you can do this in a personal statement, but only if you can demonstrate extraordinary circumstances and or growth or learning from that experience. So if you really struggled in your freshman year and your grades reflect that because it was your first time being away from home and it was a really difficult transition, you can talk about that in a personal statement. You can also use faculty rec letters to address this, or as I said, some schools will have a separate supplemental essay for you to talk through that. So that's kind of the logistics of what the personal statement is like. And I will turn it over to Tom to talk about some of the content.
Okay, so what's in it and how do you approach writing it? As you kind of heard this theme throughout our little talk here today, that, this isn't like, applying for undergraduate, for college. And in the same way, the content of your personal statement is not the same as your college essay. Okay, so basically the key points you want to address throughout the personal statement are: what's your motivation for going to grad school? Why are you doing this? I mean, you're going to be spending an awful lot of time, potentially, especially for PhDs, doing your research and at this school. What's motivating you to do that? Okay. Are you prepared to take on the intensity of doctoral studies and really in some ways start contributing to your field very rapidly as a graduate student, especially in the humanities and social sciences, where people are encouraged to publish while they are working on their doctorate. What is it that you hope to do while you're at graduate school? What is this, spark of intellectual curiosity that you have that you want to pursue? You're applying to a bunch of different schools. There's a reason. Some of it might be, as we talked about, location-based. This is probably not a good time to mention that per se. We want to focus on, the strengths of the departments, the people who are going to be your advisors, and also this is a great place to think about the resources particular programs might have, whether it be funding, even things like conference funding. Some places are generous in conference funding in addition to your stipend and things like that. Also, what material resources are at a place. You'll want to make an argument for all those things. And then, finally, you want to give them some sense of your aspiration. What is it that you're hoping to do with the degree? Usually, this is a nice little conclusion to your personal statement about what doors you think this degree can unlock for you. So what it is then, a personal statement or sometimes statement of research purpose, is an intellectual autobiography and cover letter. You're explaining the story in a way of the life of your mind. And you're like Saint Augustine. Okay, this is all very exciting. And think about that. He's one of the most renowned writers in the history of the world. So you just like him when you're doing this personal statement. You're wanting to communicate that you are going to be a future colleague, that you are not only of the people, in the department you're applying to, but while you're in graduate school, but then thereafter as a researcher and teacher scholar in the field. And so it says, that last bullet, if you have a faculty advisor, write this in the conversation with them. Yes, you want to point out that you have someone who is what I call the leading man or leading lady. You're directing your doctoral studies. There's going to be someone there to help you out, your faculty advisor. But, I think it's also helpful too to note what I call the supporting cast, who the other faculty people. And then, as I said before, to think of sort of the cast and crew being the resources and things like that. You're going to want to communicate all those things as you're writing your personal statement.
One thing I wanted to, sorry, I was muted. One thing that I wanted to jump in and add, again, I've been working with this student who's applying to grad school, and she's seen that schools sometimes differ between having you write one personal statement and having you answer all of these questions in one, versus some places will have you split it up into like a statement of purpose and a personal history statement. And again, this is sometimes program specific, but more often than not, it's school specific. So again, she's having some places say in 1,000 words, write a personal statement, and in other places in 500 words, write a statement of purpose, which is more about the research questions you might want to answer, and then a personal history, which is more talking about your intellectual background and your development as a person, as a scholar. And so again, this can sometimes look different, and you might have to do a combination of both as you're applying to a number of different programs. So just something to be cognizant of, that each school might look different. Again, Tom and I are here if you want to discuss how to disentangle those two components. But it does take some extra time to take what was a 1,000-word statement and condense it into 2 500-word statements. So just wanted to flag that.
Okay, so the personal statement, pitfalls to avoid, things to do instead of those, let's call them what they are, mistakes. You don't want to use vague language over, flowery language. We did a presentation a few weeks ago with folks from the Writing Center, and they gave some really great tips on writing. How do you avoid, and I'll just share them here really quickly. How do you avoid vague language or excessively flowery language? Well, what's flowery language? Adverbs, adjectives. You don't need all those adverbs and adjectives if you're picking the right verb. Okay, this is a big key. So if you're picking the right verb, you're going to write concisely and persuasively. So not only are we telling you what to do, we're even telling you how to do it. You're getting it all today. And that will, it just helps your writing. And especially, I would say, if you're in the humanities and social sciences, where you are likely to be doing a lot of writing in graduate school, in every piece of writing you submit, you want to present yourself as a strong writer. Okay. Using too much jargon, I think this is an important point. Not everyone reading your application is going to be expert in your field. Okay. And some fields really are very jargon heavy. I mean, I remember sitting in intro to medieval research class, but it was sort of heavy on manuscript studies, which is a field that's full of jargon. Okay. And there we were, a few people, myself and a few medievalists, and some of the medievalists who hadn't had that experience working in a manuscript studies classroom before were like, what is going on here? They left. They couldn't handle it. Okay. You don't want that to happen to the folks reading your application. You want them to be on board with your story, follow it, and be engaged with it. Okay. So don't use too much jargon. Instead, say what you want to say, communicate your points, who you are, what you've done, and what you're hoping to do. Okay. Another mistake with the special caveat at the bottom there. You don't really want to have one statement for all the places you're applying to. Multiple statements is the way to go. With that said, a lot of, let's say, the top half or 2/3 of the personal statement is probably the same. The part that, talks about what it is you're hoping to do, your motivation, your background, and what research question you're looking at. What of course changes, and you want to put serious thought into this latter part, is who your advisors are going to be, why you're applying to specific schools, what resources the schools have. That of course changes, and one big thing is you don't want to be applying to an excellent place like Yale, for example, and have a lesser place like Harvard. You've left the name in from another application. That would be a big mistake. So instead, like we said, spend a lot of time on really that last paragraph, that talks about fit with advisors and things like that. And the resources. Spend a lot of time on that paragraph. It's probably one of the most important, in terms of the personal statement, because that's what they are looking for. They're looking for your preparedness, but they're also making sure you could be the most prepared person in the world. If you're not a good fit, it's going to be difficult to get into that program. So you can definitely spend a little extra time on that, on what makes each statement different instead of what makes them all the same. Okay, asking for recommendation letters. This is like a huge question, one that inevitably comes up, all the time as people are nervous about, who the right person is. Everyone really wants to get into the best schools, and we understand that. Ultimately, the right person isn't any particular individual who has any particular job. The right person is the person who can talk about you. Okay, it's the person who knows you. It's the person who knows your aspirations. Probably, by the way, you want to send your personal statement to the folks who are writing your letters, because they'll, if they don't already know what it is you hope to do, they'll of course have a better sense of it by reading your personal statement and probably a resume as well. But it's the person who can write best about you. Okay, you are going to need 3 recommenders, and remember, you're the director of this application. There's a story you want to tell. You have a lot of control over the personal statement, which is your part of the story, but you also have control on picking your recommenders, and they're telling the other part of the story. This is supplementary and complementary to your application. And, together, this is a narrative that says who you are, and, a little bit about who you want to be as well, and what your skills and talents are. To some degree, I think we would concede, or we'd have to say that if you're applying for PhD programs, of course, it's ideal to have, a lot of faculty people on who are writing for you. Of course, it can depend on the program. In the social sciences, that may not be as much the case. In the humanities, history, for example, you probably want to err toward 3 faculty people. It might not be 3 historians, bear in mind. When I was applying for PhDs, I had someone in religious studies, someone in classics, and someone in history. Okay, people, and what was important about that? Well, my field is Reformation history, so I think a lot about theology. Good, I have a theologian. I'm a historian. I had a historian. I have a classicist. Well, guess what? I have to read a lot of Latin. This person, testified to my ability to do those things. So that was, in a way, a strategic blending of people who could speak to strengths and skills that the doctoral programs would be looking for, or in my case, doctoral program. And so, but 3 people is the key. You're probably going to be asking the same people for recs over and over again. Believe me, I'm doing this right now as I apply to things. What can I say? You feel a little bit, I understand this, that you feel a little bit of an anxiety that, oh my gosh, I have to keep asking so-and-so for recommendation. That's okay. People are happy to do it. And especially if they've written recommendations for you in the past, it's not too difficult. But with that said, you do want to give them some time. It says here 2 to 3 months. I think that's a pretty good time frame for sure. If you're applying to other things like not graduate school, but other things come up, once someone has written for you, you can probably get away with something a little tighter. But for graduate school, the 2 to 3 month timeline is probably a good thing, especially because these folks will be writing quite a few applications in this time frame. Okay, a few recommendations in this time frame, and then of course it's what's the saying? It's nice to be great, but it's far greater to be nice. Send some thank you cards and let people know what's happened to you. I'll say this, someone who writes for people somewhat frequently, it's a very rewarding to hear that students are doing well and they got to do the big thing that they wanted to do. And you walk them through the moments of anxiety all the way to the moments of success, and it's very, very exciting to see that for them. So definitely do that. Okay, the transcript and the GPA. Okay, we're all nervous about our grades in undergraduate. That's a good thing. I know this is someone who's teaching and people are always asking about grades. You want to do good, obviously, in your coursework. You want to do well. The transcript of a student who's an A student says, it says a great number of things. One of them is that you were engaged in your coursework. You were thinking about it seriously. You were, also open to direction and ideas and participating and active. It says a lot of good things about someone. On the other hand, it's not an end all be all, but grades, definitely do your best on coursework. Just like everything we say in these in this application process, what's important is to put your best foot forward all the time, right? So there's a note here about transitioning fields. I think you already got the gist from me. One can, and from Holly as well earlier, one can transition fields. Okay, I was a classics major, turned historian. Okay, it happens. A lot of times, this is actually kind of a good thing. You can show that you can build on your past experience and bring a new insight into the field in which you're entering. But of course, that's not something that your transcript says by itself. Okay, that's something that you bring to your application in your personal statement. So the other point here is there are programs. I mean, I don't think you see this too often in the humanities, but I know that you see this, like, for example, in economics and the social sciences, that require statistics or things like this, that you have to have certain things before entering a program. I guess languages in the humanities would have this. Yes, languages. So, if you're applying to programs and you're seeing those things, you either, A, want to include them in your course of study now, or B, you want to be thinking about how to do that, or I guess C, you want to have a good explanation for how you're going to do it before you start the PhD program. Okay, and that's critical. This final note here, I'll just try to get to the heart of this, which is to say, you're going to take classes as a master's or doctoral student, okay? So it's not so much about what classes you've taken, it's about showing from your coursework, and this is an important point, that you have become interested in some topic, that you're engaged in your classes and with the ideas or or the methods or the content, whatever it might be, and that you're prepared to continue in that engagement as you move forward in doctoral or master's graduate level study. Okay, the GRE, this is my favorite anecdote. When I took the GRE, I did sensationally poorly. And I remember a lot of folks who were advising me at the time were very nice, and they were nice enough to say that I should really consider retaking the GRE because my scores weren't good enough. And I said, if that's what's going to keep me out of graduate school, I think I'm just not going to go to graduate school. At this phase, what we would say is it seems that fewer programs are requiring the GRE. Many more places are making it optional. I don't know that, for example, it was super important for some programs even before we were transitioning into this phasing out of the GRE. Certainly, like in the humanities, it was sort of a commonplace for people to say, well, no one really cares about your math score or whatever. What I would say is it's hard to know what people care about. If they are requiring it, put your best foot forward. Of course, the way to do this is to get a test prep book, okay, the Kaplan book or the Princeton Review book, whatever it is. I don't want the Kaplan people to pay me a lot of money for doing product placement. I want to make sure everyone's represented here. And you get it, flip through it, pay attention to the types of questions they ask. It's something like the SATs. It's a little different. Don't go in thinking that you know exactly what it is. The essay writing section is a little different. They're very particular about what they want on that. You're going to want to pay attention to what skills you need to demonstrate as a writer to do well on that portion of the exam. And the final point is, Holly, do you know if this is still true that we're still in the online sort of option of, with COVID? Do you know if that's still true today?
I think that it is, but I'm not entirely positive. I was talking to someone anecdotally who took it over the summer, who was taking it online, who said that all of her internet things passed the test, but then of course on the day of the exam was having some difficulties. So I know that it's not ideal necessarily. So maybe they will transition out soon to being in person, but I don't know.
On the other hand, I'll say this, I would probably prefer to take it online. So, I mean, you could maybe game that a little bit as it's up to you, but not because I have a great preference for online things, but inevitably, I don't know, Holly, maybe you had this experience where you have to go to in the old days before COVID, you had to go to some very awkward, sketchy office park where there's just a GRE testing office. And they basically search you before you go, and it's all very uncomfortable. So I don't know.
And maybe on the note of the podcast recommendation too, since you recommended Malcolm Gladwell, the This American Life about embarrassing stories also features an online taking the GRE story that I thought was really funny. So would recommend, will not spoil, but will recommend for people.
And I would say Malcolm Gladwell, he didn't go after the GREs, but he also went after the LSATs a couple of years ago. So revisionist history really hitting home for the academic crowd here. So look, I think what we would say is it's become something of a formality. It is being phased out. Many places are making it optional. Some places are just not asking for it at all altogether. And some places do ask for it, but maybe depending on your discipline, there are different emphases. Get some advice on this, ask the people around you, ask Holly, ask myself, and you'll and then of course do some preparation. Okay, the timeline. Oops, as we're waiting for this slide. There we go. Okay, so the timeline. Okay, in some ways it says November, December, and after submission. In some ways, as we've kind of tried to note to you, the timeline begins. Oh, there we go. I was gonna say it begins.
Sorry, my screen was freezing, and I was like, I clicked once and nothing happened, so I clicked again, and then it skipped a slide. Sorry.
So I was going to say the timeline begins much earlier, and indeed it does. It begins in the spring, summer, and in some ways you guys are beginning it now. Maybe in the fall, if you're juniors, you're even ahead of the game, already starting to think about this. It begins in the spring, summer before you apply. You know, that means like for folks, if you're making appointments now and you're thinking about applying to PhD programs in December, you're way too late. Okay, if you're thinking about applying to PhD programs in December of next year, you're on time. You're doing great. You're the person we want to see right now. Okay. So you want to think about your field. You want to make this the spreadsheet thing. If you're not Excel spreadsheet inclined, that's okay. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know how to merge cells, but I still kept a spreadsheet, okay, with the names of schools, due dates, very important, how many recommenders they wanted, which recommenders, because you might use different recommenders for different schools, by the way, which recommenders you're using for different schools, and what are the application components. This is also a great time too, as we were talking about earlier in the program. Next spring, when the spring comes, leverage your network. Talk to your faculty. Talk to being that you're at Yale. Talk to TFs, alumni of programs. Start getting in touch with people, figuring out how they like it, who the good advisors are in your field. I'll tell you, grad students, they love to gossip. You'll get a lot of this good stuff. Okay, and who wants to, who's a good person to work with, who's not a good person to work with. Also be aware though that different people want different things. Like for example, the person I work with, who's a phenomenal person in general and a really good person for me, might not be a good person for you. Something to bear in mind. You'll get a sense of the person's style though, and personality as you move on. As we said, think about the requirements, add that to the spreadsheet. And by the way, you might want to add to the spreadsheet notes about, good advisors, bad advisors, things like that. Think about the costs. As we mentioned, the application fees, especially by for the folks who apply to clinical psychology. I know you guys apply to like 20 different schools. That's $100+ application fees. Okay, it's a lot of money. Bear that in mind. Getting your transcript ready with the fees, you're going to have to ask for it. If you've done if you're in a master's program and you're going back, you're going to have to ask for 2 transcripts. That's, like $6 a pop now. Testing dates for the GRE, the expenses of that and the prep, if you're going to take a course maybe, but also of course, just maybe buying a, whatever it is, $20 or $30 book now. And then, thinking about the research funding, you want to look into the options for funding at different places. Remember we said, and let's underscore it again here, this is my highly didactic style, go someplace where you get funding. And then in the early fall, okay, reach out to faculty. We already mentioned this. It's the Goldilocks thing. You don't want to reach out to them the first week of September because the semester is very busy. You don't want to reach out to them really in mid-October because the semester is busy with midterms. There's that sweet spot where, they're probably thinking about planning an apple picking day with their family. And that's the day they want to see your email and respond to it. That's sometime in late September, possibly early mid to late September or even early October. Working on the personal statement, this is in early fall. I think Holly and I would both agree you can always start working on it in the summer. You know what I mean? And then you will get some good feedback from others. The more eyes on it, the better, as Holly said earlier. If you're in the humanities, you need a writing sample. This is usually for folks, some portion, it can't be the whole thing, it's usually too long, but a portion of your thesis. And then by the fall, you're going to want to know exactly where you're applying. You're whittling down that spreadsheet. You're getting those sweet spot 4 to 8, schools, or 6 to 7, whatever it might be. And then you're going to be asking for the recommendation letters. Remember, we said 2 to 3 months ahead of the application date. Well, the application date is December 15 is a pretty common one. So, that means September 1 to October 1, you're asking for recommendations. And then, of course, the beautiful thing about a spreadsheet is you can do it like to-do list style. You highlight things when you get them done. And then over time, that whole list becomes, if you're me, you highlight in purple and the whole sheet is a beautiful purple, and it's all very exciting. Okay, and then November and December, you're going to ask for the transcripts. You are going to put the final drafts out on your writing sample and statements after lots of people have looked at them and given you their firm advice. Remember, these will be different for different schools. You're going to confirm the letters of recommendation and test scores, and you'll apply for, financial aid and all the very important fancy fellowships. Always good to apply for those, whatever they might be, little or small. Nothing looks good on a CV like a nice plump section on fellowships and awards, and you can start that even before graduate school, basically before you matriculate, if you win something like this. And then go ahead and submit it, and maybe stay off the Grad Cafe, but go ahead and submit it, stay off the Grad Cafe, and let's wait for the acceptances. They usually fall between January, early January. If you get it in early January, you feel great. Especially if you're in your senior year, you feel fantastic. And if you're waiting until March, you're getting a little nervous, but know that they can come through all the way to March. The visiting schools will occur, typically between February and April, probably in March. You might even run into the problem where people have the same visit weekend. Usually there are ways to coordinate with that, and their understanding of that. I mean, to some degree, people tend to be kind of making the rounds between the same places. I guess they must do some coordination on that to make it all work out, because we're pretty aware of how that works. Look into the programs, consider the funding, think about, when you're there, you have a checklist. Is this the, now that I got in, hooray, congratulations. Is this the place that I want to be? Is this the advisor I want to work with? If you've probably only had contact with your main advisor at this point. Well, remember I mentioned the supporting cast? You'll be meeting those people. On your visit. Are those the people I want to work with? Is this the culture that I want to be in, with the graduate students? Is this the graduate student culture that I want to be a part of, etc. Okay, so these are the important things to think of. And by the way, don't blow these visits off in the sense of not going to them, but in the sense of not taking them seriously, because these really can determine, when you're down to that tough decision between, Princeton and Harvard, obviously you're going to want to go to Princeton, but when you're down to that tough decision, make the visit. Maybe you want to do the Harvard brick thing in Cambridge, or maybe you want to do the beautiful neo-Gothic thing in Princeton. That makes it can make a difference, things like that for people, and who's there and what they're like. Okay. You'll be reviewing all your acceptances. It says here negotiate. I would say take that maybe a little bit lightly. You're not going to all of a sudden put on your business suit and storm into the registrar's office and demand 3 times more money because Stanford also accepted you in addition to Princeton and Harvard. But you might be able. This might be able to help you in situations where you're on the wait list or something. To say, folks, at Chicago, guess what? Well, Berkeley let me in, so you might want to be thinking about what we can do. And okay, then you make your decision. April 15th, you pop the finest bottle of or boxed wine you can afford as an undergraduate, and you move on from there.
I also want to underscore the importance of going to visit schools. My advisor in undergrad said, this is, as an academic, this is one of the few times in your life that you will be like a rock star. I got to come to New Haven and stay in the Omni Hotel. We went out to dinner at Barcelona. So it's, yes, a very fun weekend, but it's also really great, as Tom said, to meet your supporting cast. And I would include in that current graduate students, but also the cohort that you might be with as well. I got to know my cohort really well on my accepted students weekend, and in talking with them and discussing with them, I both got a sense of other places that they were thinking about going to, but then also assessing, is this a group of people that will be available and supportive of me throughout my 5 years? And to be honest, Yale was not at the top of my list going into acceptances, but it became the top of my list after visiting schools. So as you go and visit schools, keep your mind open. There's a really great possibility that you could just feel that you are in the right place once you're there. And so don't rule any place out. just because of some preconceived notions that you might have had when you were applying.
And so aren't we all so glad that Holly came and visited Yale?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder about that, how life would be different. And I think it's great too that more, the past 2 years have been virtual, but hopefully going into the future, in-person visits will be back. Because not to say that virtual are bad. I know that our department did a great job coordinating virtual recruitments, but of course, there's nothing like stepping foot onto campus in New Haven and saying like, oh yes, wow, this is where I want to be.
And the pizza,
So-
goodness, they stuff
And
you
the
with
pizza.
pizza. When you get into Yale, they stuff you with pizza for 2 days. So that's just so you know. And Barcelona is pretty good. You got Barcelona, huh? We got pizza, so that's pretty good, Barcelona.
Yeah. So with all of this, we just want to say that this is a long process. As you can see by the timeline, it really starts now if you're thinking about this now. So really set yourself up well by talking to as many people as you can. That's inclusive of us. Feel free to make an appointment on the Yale Career Link or send us an email. We're available through any stage of the process, from like, I don't know if I want to go to grad school, what does this look like, to I'm writing a personal statement here, can you read it? So really, we do encourage you to set up appointments with us. As Meredith said as well, she's also very available on the Yale Career Link, so feel free to reach out to her as well. So thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or just send us an email. But for now, we'll say see you later. See you soon, hopefully. Enjoy the beautiful fall day. Happy November to everyone. And yeah, bye.
All right, that's it.